Welcome everyone to the February chapter meeting of Wild Ones River City. My name's Marty MacArthur. I'm the president for this year, 2021. And I'm very excited that we are starting off with such a fascinating program. I know you will enjoy it tonight. Before I get going or telling you about some of the upcoming things that we have happening, I would just like to start with our Wild Ones mission statement. I'm a big believer in kind of keeping that front and center so that we all remain focused and working toward such an important goal. And so just as a little reminder, the Wild Ones mission statement is to promote environmentally sound landscaping practices, to provide diversity through preservation, restoration, and the establishment of plant communities. Our motto is healing the earth 1 yard at a time. And I really love that because every time I'm out in my gardens, I think about how I am working my little piece of the earth and trying so hard to heal it. Now, we worked very hard last year during the pandemic as a board, and in particular, the program committee. So this year you will be experiencing some really fine programs. The first part of the year, February, March, April, and May, we're having virtual programs. Hopefully we will have clearance from the health department for our June meeting, which would be our first in-person meeting. That meeting will be a field trip, and we will be looking at green infrastructure. And so that should be fascinating. All of our programs are listed on our website, rivercitywildones.org, and I really urge you to check that out. You hopefully are receiving our newsletter, our e-news on the first of each month. But if you're not, it doesn't matter. Just go to that website. It's listed there, and you can read about all the things that are coming up for that month and also about the programs. But I do have two things that I'd like to just share with you that we decided on as a board. And one is that we feel it's very important that we have our annual plant sale in July. And so we will have that. And last year during the pandemic, we learned quite a few lessons. And one is that it's very helpful both to people who want to buy plants and those of us trying to get them ready to deliver or have ready for you to have our pre-ordering time online. And so we're going to do that. This year, we're hoping to add a few extra different plants than we've carried in the past. And so there's always something to buy. Also, we have been thinking about, and as a board, really trying to focus on how can we enlarge the population how can we enlarge the number of people who know about native plants or wild ones, or start incorporating them into their landscape. And our past president, Marty Arnold, came to the board with a suggestion, and we got kind of excited about it. The suggestion was, why not rent a booth at the Fulton Street Farmers Market, and invite a member or members of the Native Plant Guild to sell their plants, and then we can provide the information and some volunteer help. This is very exciting because we could be meeting people and sort of sharing the word and the plants with people who we haven't met before and maybe come from different neighborhoods, different areas of even outside of the Grand Rapids area. So we're very excited about this, and we're looking forward to 2 times in June and 2 times in September. there will be more information about this coming, but for right now, I just wanted you to know that we would like to do that. Now, to do that, we're going to be calling on you to help us as a volunteer. Perhaps you're feeling as I do, that getting out of the house will be a really great thing. So I'm looking forward to seeing you again, and hopefully we'll have plenty of help for our new endeavor and also our plant sale in July. Now, I have one last thing to say, and that is a very important thing, that is to thank you, all of you who have renewed your memberships, have started memberships, who have kept supporting Wild Ones River City throughout a time when we were not really able to get together. It means a lot to the board to know that we have your support, and it also is an indication of the commitment that we all have to improving the landscape by adding native plants into as many yards as possible. And we couldn't have done it without you, and the board is very grateful. Our numbers held very steady in terms of membership, and that is commendable, and we thank you. Now, tonight's program is the first of 2021. I'm going to be turning this over to Rebecca Marcourt, one of our program committee members, who has worked very hard to help make this program possible. And our speaker tonight is Craig Elston, and I know you will enjoy it very much. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and I hope you enjoy the program.
Welcome, everyone. This is Rebecca Marcourt. As Marty mentioned, I'm with Programs, and I wanted to go through some of the housekeeping for tonight's program. And namely, if you have questions this evening, please add them to the Q&A, the question and answer button that you see at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to provide any comments in the chat button, but the questions we're asking that you put into the Q&A part. Also, pay attention to that chat dialogue, as I will be sharing some links with you as they may relate to something that Craig has said. Now, I am very delighted to introduce to you our first speaker of the year, Craig Elston. Like most of the best naturalists, Craig Elston began his journey of observing the wonders of nature at a young age. While famous conservationist Aldo Leopold was gifted opera binoculars to watch the migratory birds along the Mississippi River when he was young, at about the same time in his adolescent life, Craig acquired a camera to capture his observations of plants and wildlife. As a professional photographer, Craig has developed an extensive inventory of native plant pictures, as well as videos that can be found on his website and YouTube channel. At his site, as you see there in the logo, CDE Nature. He came to our chapter's rescue last May when the in-person hike had to be canceled at Amon Park by providing us with stunning pictures he's taken over the years there. As a driven naturalist, Craig initiated and manages a prairie and woodland natural area for the city of Hudsonville. He has served as the city naturalist there since 1996. He regularly leads interpretive hikes and gives presentations throughout West Michigan. Many of you might recognize Craig from the Kent County MSU Extension Master Naturalist Program, where he developed the programs on prairie. As president of the White Pine chapter of the well-respected Michigan Botanical Club, he rubs shoulders and makes observations alongside some of the most reputable botanists in the world. And if that's not enough, Craig also serves as the second vice president of Wildflower Association of Michigan, coordinating some of the logistics of their annual conference. The passion, depth of knowledge, and photography skills that Craig Elston has acquired for 4.5 decades is what we celebrate tonight, as Craig shares his quest in honoring the diverse botany of Michigan. Welcome, Craig.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for inviting me tonight. Can everybody hear? Rebecca took off. Okay, good. Okay, I'm gonna kind of breeze through these first couple since Rebecca covered part of it. As she said, I am with the Wildflower Association of Michigan, otherwise known as WAM. Our annual conference will be coming up, and I think it's 3 weeks from now. Also, I'm the president of the White Pine chapter of the Michigan Botanical Club right here in West Michigan. Sometimes it's not as impressive as it sounds, as I found out that after 5 years and nobody else would do this job, they asked me to do it. I'm going into my 3rd year, and so far we seem to be doing pretty good. The Michigan Botanical Club is a statewide organization that consists of anyone interested in botany and plants, from novice beginners to top-notch and world-renowned botanists. Each year we hold a foray for members where we spend a long weekend visiting various habitats in search of plants that are new to us. This is a great time spent with like-minded plant lovers, and you get to spend time with top botanists from around the state. This is my butterfly collection when I was 10 years old. And I started out with butterflies probably a little before plants. Although in collecting butterflies, I also learned to identify the plants that their larvae would be found on. As Rebecca mentioned, when I was 10 years old, I received my first camera. And I took pictures of things in nature on my grandparents' farm, of everything that I was familiar with. While this scene may not look like much to some of you, it is a special place to me, and one I've also shared with a couple of my children, my 2 sons. About 10 years later, I acquired my first camera with removable lens. I began shooting wildflowers on walks near my apartment, and I began to learn to identify the plants that I was taking pictures of. And then I continued from there to teach myself to identify and learn about what I was finding. For 2.5 years, I lived down the road from Sarah Nature Center in Benton Harbor. And then when I moved to Hudsonville in 1987, my father-in-law pointed out as we were going to lunch that just down the road, Hudsonville was putting in a nature park. And I could see that from my living room. And I found out the next summer what happens when you voice concern to City Hall. I went in and voiced concern of where one of the trails was going in over the top of a lycopodium, club moss. And 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the mayor congratulating me on my appointment to the Hudsonville Parks Committee. I have been on that committee ever since, and also now have a lifetime appointment. As my interest and knowledge of the many plants and birds on this property grew, I began offering tours of the park and then officially appointed as city naturalist, as Rebecca said, in 1996. I now regularly give interpretive walks in the 75-acre preserve and advise the city on projects and environmental issues. We are currently just a little below 300 species of plants documented on this property. Once we get more into sedges and grasses, it will go well over 300. As we begin looking at rare plants tonight, I want to start by looking at degrees of rarity real quick. The first one that is, and these are ones that the state uses, endangered, is a species that is at the brink of extinction now. Threatened are species that are likely to be at the brink of extinction in the near future. And special concern, while not afforded legal protection under the Endangered and Threatened Species Act, many of these species are of concern because of declining or relic populations in the state. Should these species continue to decline, they would be recommended for threatened or endangered status. Just because a species is listed or rare doesn't mean they're always hard to find. Like Virginia bluebells in this area around Grand Rapids, there are various locations where it's pretty easy to just walk down a path in a park and find them. But just because they're localized in a small area does not mean that they're plentiful throughout the whole state. And that being said, some of these things I will not freely give out locations, protect the plants and some of my sources. Some reasons for rarity. Number one, and probably foremost, is loss of habitat. Species we consider to be northern species here, present downstate. Let me start this over, I'm sorry. Some species we consider to be northern species were present downstate 120 years ago, even in Grand Rapids. Due to development, the city moving outward, and draining of wetlands, conditions that these species needed have been eliminated. We think of like the native mountain ash and some of the maples like striped or mountain maple. 120 years ago, they were listed in this area, but we think of them more as northern species now. And then there's other reasons for loss of habitat. Special conditions. The golden saxifrage shown in the background here is not necessarily considered rare, but needs cold, springy spots along streams like the cedar swamps that have been drained for farmland that we call muck out here in Hudsonville. And this plant is uncommon enough at this point that when Garrett Crow, botanist, retired professor, saw these pictures, he wanted to know where this was at because he had not seen it in the area. Some have specialized relationships, symbiotic or parasitic, and we'll look at one or two of those tonight. Maybe at the edge of the range. Some species, especially prairie species, may just come into Michigan from Indiana or Ohio, and in the Western U.P. from Wisconsin. If you look at what I'm going to show you, one of the sources in a moment, some of those range maps, you'll see what I'm talking about. Some species are just along the bottom of the state, maybe one or two counties down there. And then some things just never were very common to begin with. A couple of resources that I would encourage you to get familiar with. One is the Michigan Natural Features Inventory, otherwise known as MNFI. Their website is an invaluable resource. You can access plant and animal list, abstracts, sheets on species and communities, as well as you can pull up your county and see every known species in that county. Plant community information and much more. Detailed information on plant communities and where to find them can also be found in the book, A Field Guide to Natural Communities of Michigan, which MNFI is responsible for. The next site that I'd like you to encourage you to get familiar with is the Michigan Flora at michiganflora.net. This is hosted through the University of Michigan Herbarium. The site will give you names and information and photos of most species. It will tell you if it's native or not, what type of plant it is, tree, shrub, perennial, annual, and so on. I encourage you to just play around with the site and learn all aspects of the site for maximum benefit, and even look at the systematic keys, because sometimes you need to look at those keys to really figure out exactly which species you have. You can also get this in a book form, but there are no photos, and it is not, the book cannot be updated like the website is. Also, I use this website in the field a lot. I can pull up the keys, I can pull up individual species. As long as you're in an area, you can get reception on your phone. It will also give you a map with each county where the species is known in the state. So each blue dot is representing a herbarium specimen at the University of Michigan Herbarium for this species. If you're way out of range, would have you consult with someone, another botanist, to confirm your finding, and then you may need to document that, because we are finding new locations of plants. I'll share one with you that I found recently. And some only have old records and need new collections. So some counties, particularly close proximity to colleges, actually have better records because they've sent kids out looking. A herbarium specimen is simply a collection and pressed plant or part of a plant kept in a herbarium. They are useful for documenting locations of plants historically through the present, as well as used to compare to other specimens to confirm identifications. You can do a specimen search on this site that will actually give you the information off the tag of that herbarium specimen, and will include locations. Old records can be useful to know the areas to look because they weren't specific locations. Newer records will have GPS. Older ones may say just north of Grand Rapids, but it still gives you an idea where to look. You will notice that this species was not known from Ottawa County prior to 1999. And we're going to look at that one first tonight. So one of the first special plants that we're going to touch on tonight is right down the road from where I was living at the time I found it, in the Hudsonville Nature Park. Jeffersonia diphylla, twin leaf, is listed as special concern in Michigan. It is found in rich deciduous forest, especially on floodplains and well-drained slopes above the floodplains. The genus name honors our third president and botanical patron, Thomas Jefferson. At a meeting of the American Philosophical Society in 1792, Benjamin Smith Barton assigned the wildflower twin leaf to a new genus, Jeffersonia, to honor Jefferson's knowledge of natural history, especially in botany and zoology. He said the information of this gentleman is equaled by that of few persons in the United States. Emma Cole wrote, "Rich moist woods, rare, mid-April, Reed's Lake Woods. In the 70s, it grew in the woods along Plaster Creek, south of Hall Street." This is a plant that if you want to see it bloom, when you see the white petals beginning to open, sometimes you just need to sit down and wait because it literally can go from a bud to continue petals falling off in a matter of a few hours. Another interesting and sometimes helpful resource is Emma Cole's 1901 Grand Rapids Flora. And I know that your group has had speakers on this because I've attended those. But the information she gives can be helpful to where things were found 120 years ago, and for things that we don't commonly see in the area today that we might want to look for. Ms. Cole taught for 26 years at Grand Rapids Central High School. She was also a very accomplished botanist, and I will mention a few of her comments about some of the plants in the Grand Rapids area. In the early 1990s, the White Pine chapter of the Michigan Botanical Club went on a field trip in April to see Trillium nivalis, snow trillium in bloom. After crossing a railroad trestle and descending a steep embankment to the woods along the creek in Ionia County, we found snow trillium in bloom. As you can see, compared to the quarter on the ground in front of this plant, it is not very big. It's only a couple inches tall. Snow trillium is listed as threatened, and Michigan Flora states it is very rare and local. It is currently historically known from 4 counties in Michigan, including Kent County, although it is highly unlikely that it is still in Kent County. It has been said to be in Ottawa, but I have 30 plus years have not been able to find it. Emma Cole listed snow trillium as rare, but notes this from Miss Anna M. Clark. This species having been frequent about the city in the 70s. That's 150 years ago, and now it's long gone from our area. And snow trillium does bloom around the 4th of April with or without snow. Leatherwood is not rare in the state. but I did have to work to find the first ones for me. It blooms in April and may be overlooked by the early bloom time. Emma Cole wrote that it was frequent in Georgetown and other woods in the area. I couldn't find it and kept researching the plant and where to look. After a round trip of over 200 miles to Jones and Three Oaks, I finally found a few. Then after much searching, I have found one specimen in Grand River Park in Georgetown. Since then, I have found other locations such as Rosie Mounds and Amon Park, both in Ottawa County. I have also found sizable population in Mackinac County, which is a new county record. Durka has a distinct color, light kind of tan brown bark, and a single stem with an umbrella crown. And it does stand out once you know what you're looking for. And the leaves resemble spice bush in appearance. While a gentleman was showing me some areas for potential snow trillium locations, because he had spent time with Fred Case years ago, he showed me this floodplain along a creek in Ionia County. And he said that Fred Case had found what at that time was thought to be the rarest plant in Michigan. The plant was the endangered heart-leaved plantain. Not having been seen since 1925, it was thought to be extirpated from the state until it was found again in 1990. It has since been found in other locations. Early June of 2019, a photo was posted to the NBC Facebook page. I requested the location from the person and was given coordinates. So on a Monday evening, I took off for Ionia County. And this deep floodplain woods was about 6 inches deep in water, full of poison ivy and many fallen logs to trip on. With its large leaves that resemble skunk cabbage, this plantain doesn't take too long to locate when you're in the right area. If it looks familiar, it's because it looks like the common plantain of your lawn, only on steroids. One clue that it is not skunk cabbage is the flowering stem arising from the plant. Here is the flower, and yes, my wife would say, you drove all the way there for that? While common or great white trillium is not rare, this color form from the UP is. There is a woods northwest of St. Ignace that many of the trilliums will open pink after a cold winter. Berrien County is likely the only location in the state for the native population of the threatened prairie trillium. Other county records are thought to be escapees from cultivation. They can be found both at Warren Woods and the M&A Trillium Ravines Preserve. It is found in rich floodplains and upland beech maple forest. Also at Trillium Ravine, you'll find a threatened toadshade, Cecil trillium. And there are actually 4 species of trilliums at this preserve, well worth a trip to Niles in early May. In 1998, the threatened dwarf lake iris was designated as Michigan's official state wildflower. This cheery little flower can be found blooming for nearly a month in May and June along the Cabo northern shorelines of Lake Michigan and Huron, as well as the southern shores of these lakes in the extreme northern lower peninsula. One fall, when I was at the headlands in Emmett County, I noticed massive amounts of short plants that look like little irises. Sure enough, the next spring, I found many of them blooming. Some of the shoreline populations, though, are currently underwater with the high water levels. At only about 2 inches tall and blending into the rocky cobble or hidden under the edge of the cedars, it can be difficult to find this little iris. An endemic Great Lakes species, it is currently known outside of Michigan only from Manitoulin Island, the Bruce Peninsula of Ontario, and the Door Peninsula of Wisconsin. After years of seeking the special concern green violet and finding old known locations, including under one of the runways at the Grand Rapids Airport, I saw a posting on Facebook of the non-viola violet in bloom. So after a 2-hour drive in the rain and a short walk in the dark woods under dark cloudy skies, my friend and I found green violet along with some other interesting species at TNC's Weston Preserve in Washtenaw County. I had also tried to find the threatened Calypso orchid in Wilderness State Park without success. Then one Memorial Day weekend in 2019, my friend Steve had posted pictures of it in bloom in the UP. After contacting him for directions, he said if I met him in St. Ignace at 7 o'clock the next morning, he would take me to it. So Monday afternoon, I headed north, and at 7 a.m. we headed out to the cedar swamps, and we found Calypso blooming. One of the things that does make this plant currently rare is in years past, it's such a sought after little orchid to be photographed that in years past, photographers would clip off all the imperfect ones, get their pictures, and then clip off the rest of them so that nobody else could get the picture. Therefore, you take away its ability to reproduce. Another small orchid, the Ram's Head Lady Slipper. An artist friend shared with me a location near Conway of this special concern orchid. And because of the low light conditions where it was growing under the fir trees, I made the annual pilgrimage for about 3 years to get good photos of this charming little orchid. While it is rare, I have since found other habitats and locations in the Upper Peninsula. I first heard of the threatened prairie smoke in 1995 when the Botanical Club put out a notice that we could rescue plants from a development site in Newaygo. Several of us got together and under the DNR permission, relocated several thousand plants one day in June. This also brought up a question as we were preparing for tonight. Some of the ethics on collecting rare plants. First of all, if it's listed as threatened or endangered, it is protected by law. It is illegal to collect or possess any part without special permits. There are laws that make available to nurseries to be able to get permissions and then sell offspring. But also random collection can make rare plants rarer. With the letter of permission in the front seat of my car, I returned home with 107 plants that day. These were split between the Hudsonville Nature Center and my yard. I still have this plant growing at the edge of my small prairie in my yard. Since then, I have found it in a few other locations in Newaygo and Allegan counties, as well as Drummond Island. The inconspicuous flowers appear in May, followed by the beautiful showy fruits with the very long plumose styles in June. This is a time when many people actually look for the plant because it's much easier to find. There are still some sizable populations, such as on Maxton Plains and Drummond Island. To see this kind of display, though, you need to take a few trips. It may take a few years, as it does not bloom this profuse every year. But Maxton Plains is a definite place to get to know. Very interesting with a lot of rare plants and even plants that are stunted because of the harsh growing conditions. In some of these areas of West Michigan, where you are finding prairie smoke that also have wild lupin, you could possibly find a state threatened and federally endangered Carner blue butterfly. The endangered fire pink. I had seen this in Virginia, but not in Michigan until June of 2008. After another Facebook posting, I got directions to the general area and did a little Google Earth looking and figured out where to go. So a friend and I headed to Portland. And in the same woods that you can find snow trillium, this plant was growing. But rather than on the low banks and floodplains where you'd find the snow trillium, fire pink is on the side of the steep slopes high above the Grand River. It is a wonder that it didn't end up in the river because of some of the precarious positions on the steep slope. After navigating the steep slope, we found many more on top of the hill and the edges of the woods, and much easier to get to on level ground. Hyssop-leaved fleabane is threatened in Michigan. This little white flower is known from marl fens associated open tamarack swamps in Mackinac County. If you have driven down 123 on your way to Paradise, you have probably driven within 100 or 200 yards of this rare plant. In the same cedar swamps, you can also find Arethusa or dragon's mouth orchid. While the statuesque American Columbo is not considered a rare plant, many of us have never seen it. After many years of visiting a location at the trailhead of the Calhaven Trail in Kalamazoo, I never was able to see it bloom. I finally saw it blooming at the Mines Golf Course in Grand Rapids after a Botanical Club foray. This was the scene in Allegan State Game Area in 2019, a once-in-a-lifetime and exceptional bloom year. The monocarpic plant with a large rosette of broad light green leaves for a number of years or even decades blooms once, sets seed, and dies. The unique flowers are found in whorls around the stem, which can reach 6 feet or more in height. Columbo is found in dry, like oak, hickory, sassafras, or sometimes moist forest openings. The endangered Michigan monkey flower is the only plant entirely endemic to Michigan. It is found in cold calcareous springs, seeps, and streams through northern white cedar, as well as the base of bluffs near the Great Lakes shoreline, where it forms mats. I had looked for this for several years. It's been on my list for a long time. And then finally was taken to a ditch where we found what we believe the leaves of plants had already bloomed. And in the following July, I returned there and found it blooming. Also was given a tip on Glen Lake, where there are huge mats of it growing right on the edge of Glen Lake in a park. Endemic to the sand beaches and dunes of Lakes Michigan and Huron, and at 2 sites in Lake Superior, listed as threatened under both Michigan and federal law, is pitcher's thistle. Pitcher's thistle isn't very difficult to find. It's found in various Ottawa County parks along the lakeshore and quite easily found along Highway 116 on the way to Ludington State Park and along US 2 west of St. Ignace in the UP. This thistle was first noted by Zena Pitcher on the great sandbanks of Lake Superior, which presumably are the Grand Sable Dunes, during the 1826 to 1820 period when Pitcher was stationed as an armory surgeon at Fort Brady, Sault Ste. Marie. First-year rosettes can easily be mistaken for wild wormwood, which wormwood is the inset here. When wormwood is much finer and a little bit greener, not so white looking. And as with many thistles, Pitcher's thistle is also a larval host plant of the American painted lady butterfly. The threatened Lake Huron tansy can often be found in the same northern dunes and shoreline areas as Pitcher's thistle. This in the northern, lower, and eastern upper peninsula. The lovely little special concern, butterwort, was on my list to find for many years. One day while visiting a Lake Huron shoreline near the Dolomite Mine west of Cedarville, I stumbled across this little plant. Because of my excitement, my friend came running over thinking I had been hurt. The bright chartreuse leaves of this carnivorous plant attract insects to digest and extract nutrients from. Very brilliant color. Once you start finding it, it'll really show out. Butterwort is found in wet depressions within dunes along Great Lakes northern shorelines, along cobbly marley shores, and marley fens, especially in the eastern upper peninsula. And in the western upper peninsula, it can be found on the alkaline bedrock, such as conglomerate of basalt shores of Lake Superior. As you can see here, it is growing right on the rock along Lake Superior. It amazes me that these things can grow on the edge of steep rocks where you know there's ice is piling up in the winter. If you were in the Master Naturalist Prairie class that I had taught for 13 years, you may remember this photo of what used to be Prairie Ronde in Kalamazoo County. Old prairie books list the cemetery at this site as having Hill's thistle, but I have never found it there in nearly 30 years of looking. But in 2019, I heard about it growing near Grayling, some 220 miles to the northeast. Yes, I went and found it in the Jack Pine area. I've also since found it at the Maxton Plains and Drummond Island. And anytime I'm in Grayling in August, I like to stop and check on the Solidago vossii, or Voss's goldenrod. And I'm just going to read parts of this out of the Michigan Flora for a little background here. Although a specimen had been collected at the site as early as 1933, Edward Voss first noted in the 1960s that a goldenrod population on the sandy shores of Tiny Howes Lake in Crawford County, Michigan, resembled Solidago houghtonii and reported it as that species. From morphological observations and a chromosome count in the 1970s, it was believed that Howes Lake plants were a distinct form of true S. houghtonii. It suggested these might be of hybrid origin, different from that of houghtonii. In 2010, after genetic testing, it was named as a separate species. It is now believed to be contiguous within an area of approximately 2¼ square miles in 2 counties in northern Michigan. And if you are in the right area and you see one of these signs, you probably will find Voss's goldenrod. The Asclepias milkweeds in Michigan. In Michigan, we have 11 native species of milkweed. And as you can see here, I have now found and photographed all 11 of those as of last year. 3 are threatened, 1 is endangered. I'll just read off which ones they are, the common names left to right, starting with the top row, are clasping, poke, tall green, and swamp milkweed. Then dwarf, purple, Sullivan's, and common milkweed. Then butterfly weed, world, and green milkweed. And I was just counting up, on a good day in Allegan State Game Area, you could find 7 of these species. The MNFI had put a post on Facebook about a rare milkweed, the dwarf milkweed. It showed pictures of the area and this Google map image that you're looking at here. In wanting to find all the Asclepias in Michigan, I saved the information and images to my places to visit folder. And in late June of 2019, another botanist had posted pictures of this rare plant blooming. So this gave me a time frame of when to look. because sometimes you wonder in the UP, do the things bloom the same time they would around here? And so this helped narrow down when to go. So after much on again and off again plans with COVID last year, I finally ended up with a campsite where I could take a shower at Fayette State Park for the end of June, beginning of July. So on Tuesday morning, with the photos in hand, I headed to Menominee in the Western U.P. When I arrived, I saw this scene in this photo, but no milkweed to be found. So I started searching the open oak savanna area and finally came across a small patch of dwarf milkweed. I was awed by its beauty as I observed and photographed it. These plants are usually probably with less than a foot tall. Now, if you want to get an idea how crazy you can get with this, the flashing red star on the left side in the UP is where I found the dwarf milkweed on Tuesday, and I could see Wisconsin across Menominee River. Then some 500 miles away on Saturday, I could see Canada across the St. Clair River as I entered the Algonac State Park to find 2 other listed milkweeds. My main species of interest that day, July 4th actually, was the threatened Asclepias sullivanti, Sullivan's milkweed. They are found in moist prairies and were easy to find along the trail in the prairie at the park. And a bonus was another threatened species, the purple milkweed, which I had seen once before but needed better photographs of. In some of these plants, the color was so deep and intense, it was almost leaning toward black. Even though the trip was well worth the time and effort, even though my wife had to remove this hitchhiker from my back the next morning. Known from 7 counties in Michigan, in dry, sandy prairies and oak barrens, this threatened species can be found in one of Ottawa County's parks. It can be difficult to see as it blends well with the background vegetation. I first heard of Trichostoma, or bastard pennyroyal, from an NBC 4A. One of the other field trips saw it, so I went back to the area the next week and looked around the whole area and could not find it. Then I saw a posting on Facebook from Ottawa County and was given directions to the location in Robinson Forest. Another name is blue curls, which if I can get this to work, you can get the idea right here. The anthers curl up. And another plant in that same genus is the threatened false pennyroyal. Found this on Drummond Island at the Maxton Plains. And I kind of put this picture in just to show a little of the small size of this plant, as those are lichens growing on rocks right behind it. False pennyroyal is known from limestone areas such as Drummond Island and the Thunder Bay Island, and also very local in sandy fields or other sterile ground. I have accidentally found the threatened pine drops in both Copper Harbor and in Ottawa County Park. It is found in dry to moist woods dominated by pines or mixed conifers, usually with a well-developed needle duff. Pine drops is dependent upon a fungus that forms mycorrhizal relationships with a forest tree. The special concern grooved yellow flax is a very small, inconspicuous plant found in prairies and dry sand open ground like the Newaygo Prairie. It can be very difficult to find because it is short. A slender plant blends in with the vegetation surrounding it. You see right here the yellow flowers, and then if you'd follow down, you'd find the plant. But when you're walking there, you can stand and look right at it and not even see it. Grooved flax gets its name from the grooves on the seeds. The threatened round-fruited loosestrife was an accidental find on the edge of a lake in Allegan State Game Area in 2017. Because of high water and access to the site has not been seen since. This is a good example of the possibilities when exploring new sites. Many people know the special concern meadow beauty with its rich pink flowers. It can be found in sunny, moist, sandy to mucky shores and swales in acid soil. Seasonal water fluctuations seem to promote prolific flowering, as seen here in one of Ottawa County's open spaces. It likes areas that are flooded in the spring but dry out towards summer, and that's when it'll bloom the best, is when you have that fluctuation. Not as common and known from only 2 counties in Michigan is the threatened Maryland meadow beauty. And it can be found alongside of the Virginia meadow beauty in places like the Allegan State Game Area. But notice the almost white petal color. And if we were to put up pictures of the seed capsule and the stem side by side, there are definite differences that these are not the same species. They're two separate species. The endangered orange fringe orchid can be found at Bishop's Bog in Portage along the boardwalk in July. I will warn you, it is a floating boardwalk, but it only floats before you step on it. Once you step on it, it may sink and spray your face full of nice smelling bog water. The last one here, I cannot show you pictures of the flowers of the putty root orchid, as I am going to be hunting for the flowers of this orchid in May. While not listed, many people have not seen this plant. The leaves appear in the fall and are very efficient at photosynthesizing at temperatures down to around 35 degrees Fahrenheit, as long as they're not covered by snow. By the time the small flowers appear in the spring, the leaves are no longer to be found. So to find this, you need to find a location, visit in the fall and find the leaves, mark those spots with GPS, and then go back in the spring and hope you can find some blooming. One thing I did learn at both sites in Sheboygan and Cass County, out of many, many leaves, you will find 2 or 3 flowering stalks. One thing that I've learned in searching for native plants is if you are clean and comfortable, you probably haven't found anything good. The more mosquito and bug bites, the dirtier you are, the better. Just as I close, if you see me from either of these views, don't be afraid to stop and say hello. I'm always glad to share what I'm shooting. And an example of that is a couple of years ago at the Headlands, a family was asking what I was doing, thinking I was taking pictures of birds. For some reason, everybody thinks you're taking pictures of birds. But I was able to share with them about the state wildflower, the dwarf lake iris, and then direct them to where they could find it. So thank you for allowing me to share with you this evening.
Greg, thank you very much. That was excellent. And I really want to thank you for all that time that you put into this and sharing all the wonderful photos that you've taken, but also the stories that go with them. They add such value and content to what we're looking at. It was really remarkable. We do have some questions this evening that I'd like to present to you because I think you would be the best person to respond to them. And I'll ask them at this time. Let's see, the first one we had, and Amy Heilman answered it, but let's see if it's the right place. The question from Rick came in at, what was the name of the preserve with the 4 trillium species? And Amy thought it was the butterwort.
It's a Trillium Ravines.
Trillium, okay.
It's in Niles. It's a Michigan Nature Association property.
Okay, thank you. And maybe, I'm sorry, maybe what I'm looking at is a question to the first species that you had mentioned that Dr. Crow had asked you where it was taken, the photo. Ruth thought it might be one species, but what do you recall the name of that plant that you had shown earlier in the presentation?
Golden saxifrage.
Okay. Great. That's what Ruth Oldenburg's thought it was. So that answers that.
And wear muck boots to find it.
And sounds good. Craig, an important question that we have that came in from Eleanor was, are there any laws or is there a way to protect endangered species from development that you know of, or if you were to explain that, it'd be tricky.
Yeah, yes and no. Unfortunately, once they're cleared to development, the bulldozer can do whatever they want. Although it's illegal for you and I to just go out and remove them. The prairie smoke was a good situation where they had found out and knew it was there and were given time to go in and move it. The DNR worked with groups to do that. Unfortunately, they don't do that very often. It would be nice to see it done more. It depends on how rare it is. Sometimes the DNR will have you mitigate a site or work around it. But again, once they approve a site, it's pretty much everything goes.
Right, okay. And we do have, we can share a list that you can search by state which species are threatened or endangered. I'll put it in the chat right there.
And then on the MNFI site has the listing of all of Michigan's plants and animals.
Oh, that's excellent. Okay, let's see. The other question we had came from Amy Heilman, and she was wondering, of the milkweed species you shared, which one is technically considered endangered?
I believe that is the dwarf milkweed.
Okay.
One in the Western Upper Peninsula.
Great. All right, let's see. I think, I'm sorry, I'm just catching up. I think there's some more questions here. Well, we've got some nice comments. Janet mentioned that her sister did her PhD research on the pitcher's thistle. Kat Doherty mentioned how beautiful your photos are. They're fabulous. Cheryl English saying, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and experience. It's such a privilege. Sally Treon asks, I am curious how you organize your photo files. For example, do you create folders or use iPhoto or another program designed to keep them organized? That's a great question, Sally.
Partly because I literally have tens of thousands of photos. I try to go through it. I'm a little behind right now, but I go through them and then organize by species into folders. Makes it just a lot quicker and easier for me to find them when I want them.
Okay. Thank you. Sally, I hope that answers that question you had. Sally herself is a photographer, so I'm sure she appreciates that, especially.
Some people use other software. Just for me, the folder system works well.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we have a few more. Carol said that she has trout lily. They have trout lily. Is it endangered?
No. And there are 2 species in the area. One is yellow, one is white.
Okay. Barbara asks, where did you find the purple pennyroyal?
Maxton Plains.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's 2 pennyroyals there, but the small one was on Maxton Plains.
Okay.
And the larger, the bastard pennyroyal, the larger one also known as Blue Curls, was at Robinson Forest, Ottawa County.
Okay. Great. Steve asks that he mentions how great your photos are, Craig, and if you use a macro lens.
I currently use a 150 millimeter macro. I still have my 60 millimeter as it doesn't compress things, so sometimes I pull that out for more depth of field. But yeah, I do it with a macro to get close. In the summertime, that's my main lens on the camera.
Okay. Along those lines, this is my own question, Craig. Do you ever have classes where you instruct and teach people about photography?
I have a workshop that I've taught a few times, and it's geared toward flowers and particularly wildflower photography. It's about 3 hours class session, and then we go outside and practice.
Okay. Well, if you happen to have any coming up, we'd sure love to hear about that and include that in one of our newsletters. I bet we would be happy to do that because I'm sure there are some people who would be interested in this group.
Okay.
Let me make sure I'm going through some of these other questions. Craig, Amy Heilman asks, what portion of the state has the most rare native plants?
I am not the one to answer that. You can find them all over. You know, a couple guys that I know through the Botany Club are doing a Flora in the Allegan State Game Area, and they have drastically increased the documented rare species there in the last 5 years or so. There are rare plants all over the state. I suppose, you know, some areas probably more than others, but I'm not really the one with that answer.
Okay. Let's see. Kathy's asking about the field guide to the natural plant communities. We can send you that link, Kathy, in just a moment. Yes, Janet, Craig has a website, and Ruth looks like she's typing it in right now. I'm hoping that I'll make sure we've got all these questions answered. All right, so I think we've got the questions answered there. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this evening. Feel free to add any further questions. I'll stick around for a few more minutes and get them in our record, and we'll respond to them as we can. But thank you very much, Craig. This concludes our presentation this evening.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Be sure to check out Craig's website and his YouTube channel. He always updates and adds new things, so be sure to keep that as one of your favorites. You'll definitely know you'll appreciate and think it's worth your while. Thank you, everyone.